Welcome back to Middle Class Magic. I'm Stefan, and today we are doing the first installment of Off the Clock. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about some topics that I have no right or knowledge to talk about, but luckily I bring guests on who are far more intelligent than myself. Speaking of which, I'm here today with Joseph, one of the owners of the local game store that we frequent and official partner of Middle Class Magic, Iron Golem Games. So thank you for coming in today and just helping me piece this together and, hopefully enlighten me on topics that I talk about that I shouldn't.
I'm sure you know about the game.
Right.
This is just a system to talk about the game and figure out what we're playing and try to make games better, right?
Right. It goes anywhere from, controversial bannings to, hot takes from Wizards of the Coast itself to just the community being crappy to each other in general.
Or amazing.
Or amazing, yes. I am a little bit of a, downer sometimes, so I look at things narcissistically, or not narcissistically, but...
Pessimistically.
Pessimistically, there you go. See, once again, don't know what I'm talking about. But today, we are a little late jumping on the bandwagon, but we are going to talk about the bracket systems and pros, cons, what we think. I will start by saying that overall, I think I'm in agreement with them. It's just I have certain reservations and concerns and, just things that I'm concerned about. And then, thing about hopping it on late, as everybody else is all over the internet, they're already talking about the things that I'm probably going to raise concerns on, but it's just,
I think you should be concerned. This is framed as a beta. They've put a lot of work into this, and it shows in what they've put out. It's changed a lot since the initial kind of discussion of these. I don't remember what the system was called, but then there were 4, and they just discussed it right after the Wizards took over the format. But this is a beta. This is meant to be stress tested. It's meant to be played with and interpreted by the community. I'm sure they're going to do tests and get feedback from players at the upcoming MagicCon in Chicago and other events going forward.
Yeah, they did mention, excuse me, they did mention in the letter that Gavin had put out about testing it at MagicCon Chicago and stuff like that. It does seem, though, that Wizards is trying to go into some sort of structured format for Commander. Like they have, modern, standard, they have those kind of tournaments. And it feels like they might be going that way with Commander because right now that's their moneymaker.
If you look at what they've put out for this, it's not like what they have for those other formats. 60-card constructed formats have ban lists and what you're required to do and all the stuff in the MTR and the jar and all that. Like, there's a lot of things in tournament rules that will apply if you play Commander in a tournament. But 60-card constructed things are looked at differently. We have that list up of, they made the infographic and they've come up with a new one that's slightly different. And there's a lot on there that's about what you should be playing or what you should expect from the game. When you sit down to play 60-card constructed, you're expecting to play against one opponent and try and beat them with your cards.
Right.
When you're sitting down to play Commander, it might not always be that.
That's fair, because, they did kind of, with the initial, I want to say, graphic for the brackets here, let's go ahead and pull that up, it is very barren.
It's a little sparse on the descriptive side.
Right.
There's a lot here about the restrictions of the format, and I think a lot of people latched onto that in a kind of negative way, where they're like, oh, the bad actors can just make something in Exhibition 1 that's really broken that just doesn't use these things, because you can't account for synergy in a really relevant way with a small list of restrictions like this. But that's not what this is for. Right.
I saw that Rachel Weeks, shout out to Rachel Weeks from Command Zone. Hopefully, eventually they will watch this. But, she went ahead and made a, Commander Brackets beta, a more in-depth expectations of what they want. So, like with the Class 1 exhibition, I want to just show off my casual themed deck. Decks prioritize theme over function. They have a goal outside of winning, anything from showcasing an under-supported mechanic to a favorite artist. I'm sure we've all, this has been beaten, to death already online, but I mean, it's your typical ladies looking left decks, or everybody's wearing a hat, or moonlight decks.
I'm playing this specific card, this specific frame treatment. I'm playing all these cards that look cool together. And you won't see this as an experienced Magic player, as someone who sits in a game store for hours a week. You don't see these kinds of decks often in that realm. Like, you're not going and sitting down at your LGS and seeing people play Bracket 1. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just an observation bias. Where kind of experienced players who've been playing the game for a long time might not remember when we had these decks, when we first started, when we were playing kitchen table Magic back at home. For some of you, it might have been 60 card constructed or Star or some weird old format that barely anyone remembers. But we all had these decks for playing casual Magic. This is just giving that a space to play, and maybe we'll see more of it.
Right, and that definitely pans it. I have seen my fair share. I mean, everybody has like the white border tribal or like the pony deck. Although lately that pony deck can get kind of competitive with some of the stuff that they've been printing out. But I guess my biggest reservation is it does feel like I was saying earlier, Wizards is trying to codify Commander as something that they could potentially do structured events for, whether it's a tournament or whether it's just something where prizes can be won. And once you put a prize on it, that's when I think people can start trying to bend the rules to their benefit. Like we brought up, and like everybody's brought up, is I have this super optimized deck, but technically it's a 1. And if it were ever in a structured event, I feel like they could be hiding behind, the structure basis of the brackets. And yeah, somebody could be like, well, the spirit of the bracket 1 is you're not really trying, or bracket 2 even. I think if they were to do an event, it'd probably be levels 3, 4, and 5. But I mean, they could, I don't want to say hide, but they could hide in bracket 3 with an optimized deck and gun for the prize, and technically
I can see that happening. I also think that there is an onus on the tournament organizer to create a prize structure and a system to promote play that fits the bracket you're running. I could never see myself running an Exhibition or a Core event, and if I run an upgraded event, the prize structure is going to be based on play or randomly distributed prizes rather than being super top heavy. Obviously, rewarding winners to some extent is important, but for a casual event, a tournament organizer is likely going to make the prizing support casual play.
So, I know some LGSs have done it before. Like when I lived in Wisconsin for a little bit, there was this LGS that I went to, and the owner there did something where it's, hey, it's a Commander tournament. Yes, you get prizes for winning, but also it's how did you win? Like throughout the day, if somebody won by milling everybody out, or if somebody won by, achieving, or even if they lost, if they had like over 400 life or something, like the quirkier ways or small achievements, not necessarily winning the game per se.
And a lot of people and stores have done that to create tournaments that are engaging in different ways. But this system can be used both for the player and by the tournament organizer. They can say, we're going to run a CDH tournament, and now people have a way to determine that it's a CDH tournament. Even if it's a little loose, it's a little less broad, between the control of the prize structure and how the tournament is run, you can fit a tournament to support or benefit players having good games within each of these brackets that reasonably could be played in a tournament setting.
Right. I still feel like there's a lot of gray area. Like you were bringing up Modern before. You know what to expect. I mean, unless they actually codify like ground rules, yeses and nos, I still feel like the interpretation is open to the player, and that in a structured event. I mean, if you're abusing this just to go to your LGS and pub stomp, you're a POS. Like, there's no other way around it. I mean, people do that now with the, quote unquote old system. But and again, this is all just, doomsayers, like if Wizards is going to do a structured event. It's a little open to interpretation for the players, and I just feel like that can be manipulated and taken advantage of.
Any system they built for a format as broad as Commander is going to have flaws that are exploitable. Rather than looking at this as a system to stop bad actors, and this is more of a system to promote good play, right? Rather than fixing the problems, they're giving a structure to solve problems within your own playgroup, within your own tournament, if you're running it as a tournament organizer. It's not about, again, the restrictions of this format. It's not about codifying what your deck is. It's about saying, oh, this deck is at least a 1. It's at least a 2. It's at least a 3. That's what those specific cards say.
Right.
The descriptions and the, ethos of that bracket is what's important. And you should go into a game wanting to play against similar decks. It's more fun for everyone. And if your joy from winning games, from playing games, is to win them, and you want to optimize a 3, you should work within the restrictions of the cards and the description of bracket 3.
Right. Within the restrictions of the cards. So that brings up another point. I guess we'll call this topic, not all cards are created equal. You start getting into the finer things. I know it's improbable for Wizards to go through every card that exists in Commander, assign it whether a point system or...
Do you want a deck build with that?
Right, like that would be obnoxious. But you got to look at the blanket terms that they kind of use too, where they say non-specific tutors. Just using that one for example, you and I both know that demonic tutor and diabolic tutor are two vastly different tutors.
Yes.
Like text, they're the same. You go find any card in your deck, put it into your hand. One costs 2, one costs 4.
Yeah.
Like demonic or diabolic tutor in any form of competition is just a bad card. Like
there are corner cases for lots of cards, but yes,
right. But
you can't play Diabolic Tutor if you're trying to cascade into Living End.
Exactly. But if you look at the way they're naming things, it's just tutors.
Yeah.
I mean, not all cards are created equal. How can they just blanket cover something like that, like tutor?
And I would argue that there are tutors that aren't included in this because they're specifying non-land tutors. I think crop rotation is stronger than Diabolic Tutor.
Absolutely.
And it's excluded from this because it's a land-based tutor, and that doesn't mean much, except when it does. Right. But I think it's more about, again, tutors and the broad span of how good they are relevant to the contents of your deck. It doesn't matter how good Demonic Tutor is if it's getting a vanilla 2/3 from Legends or something. If your deck is an exhibition deck and you're running Demonic Tutor or Diabolic Tutor because you're allowed a few tutors.
Right. They should just be sparse, but
the card quality of your deck should be less. So the tutors are worse inherently. Tutors are about consistency in this format, or finding specific silver bullets or answers. And at a lower bracket, I feel like that's can be a very good thing. You've got longer games, you've got people threatening to, like, win the game with a very large board, or you have games that you want to go longer. You're here to play socially. And being able to tutor up something to either end the game that's going really long, or continue the game when someone has a commanding board state and you need to find a single answer, can be a good thing. But there should only be a few of them. And determining card quality, like, if you're building an exhibition deck, maybe you choose the 4-drop, because it fits more into the ethos of exhibition.
For me, entry-level players, because, with our channel, we're trying to at least showcase, the smaller ends of things. Like, I think episode 1, we did all precons, what it's like to go in, purchase a precon, and just sit down and shuffle up and play, that kind of thing. You have somebody come in to the game, they learned about it, they're getting the hang of it, they get the precon, and then they start learning the precon, and it's great. And then they slowly want to start upgrading it. And they see other players, like, cast a demonic tutor, or a Gaia's Cradle, or something like that, and for the most part it is still technically a precon, and they put in a demonic tutor, but they don't really know how to pilot it yet, or they don't really know. It's like, okay, I have a demonic tutor, what am I tutoring for? Because then it goes back to deck synergies and player abilities. And again, under the presumption that this was some sort of codified event that Wizards would put on, is that not sort of punishing, in a way, newer players by forcing them up a bracket?
It kind of depends. Right now, when we're at the inception of this, yes. Later, as we play with this more, as it's developed more, because again, this is just a beta, players are going to be more used to that. And maybe when you're playing at bracket 2, you've got a deck ready to play against other players, and it doesn't have demonic tutors. It might have powerful cards. And when you pick up a powerful card, it might not be a game changer. There's a lot of powerful cards that aren't. In addition, the new players now have this resource that's relatively understandable, even without a huge knowledge of the game, that they can go and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't be picking up these game changers, because then I'll be playing against decks that are also playing these game changers.
Right.
I think there's also kind of a responsibility as experienced Magic players to look at your decks and be honest about where they are. This is a tool for you to use to manage who you're playing with and what you're playing against. You should want to play good games.
Right.
I think games that are balanced tend to be more fun.
Yes and no. Again, it circles back to what you brought up earlier about what is your goal for the game, what is a better game to you. And it's so subjective, and that's what makes this, I don't want to say a hot button item, but how anything Wizards does is taken with, both extremes on the internet. I mean, look at the...
There's a lot of people who play Magic now.
Right.
We're going to have different opinions.
Right. And in some cases, the passion that it incites is good, and other times, terrible. Look at the recent bannings that were not great reaction on the internet. And the caveat to all of this is it's been mentioned again and again, even in the article itself, is this is not replacing Rule Zero. If you're playing, coffee table or kitchen table Magic, and you're just playing with your friends, you don't have to follow this. You can still do your Rule Zeros. You can still have, whatever. And I guess...
This is just becoming part of the Magic's lexicon, right? Right. Magic has this really interesting, development of language that we've built from playing this game for forever. We've got nicknames for certain cards. There's mechanics. There's deck archetypes and all of those kinds of things. We've developed a way to talk about this game, and this is just another way to talk about the game. It's just a little bit more structured than my deck's a 7.
Right. Touching up on the old system, I know
I wouldn't even call it a system.
The olden days.
There was like one image that was built by I don't even remember who that gave like a scale of 1 to 10, and it was vaguely similar to this in a lot of ways, and then everybody just used a scale of 1 to 10 based on that, but didn't ever reference it.
Right. I think 1 to 10 itself is the issue. I mean, that's kind of the if de facto, like the de facto is, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is this? I think 10 is too many numbers, because I've never heard somebody say my deck's a 1 in the 1 to 10. It's always the least I've ever heard was like a 4 or 5.
And realistically, this is a scale of 1 to 3. 1 and 5 are outliers.
Right.
You are generally playing those with a group of people who are intending to play those.
That's fair.
When you're sitting down at a casual table, unless someone says, I brought CDH, does anyone else have CDH? Or I brought an Expedition deck, does anyone else bring an Expedition deck? You shouldn't expect to play with those decks with 2 through 4. It's going to be an unpleasant experience for everyone, and most people sitting down with a CDH deck want to play CDH. You might have more games between Expedition and Core than others, but realistically, again, you're not going to find those kinds of decks being brought to events. Most people who have a deck that is built along those lines aren't intending to play it in a tournament setting.
Right, and that's fair. Really, a scale of 1 to 3, that does make sense. However, touching up on the article here, what was I reading earlier? It was saying right here. So under number 1 that he has listed out, it says, one thing Commander has lacked is a good way to discuss what kind of game you want to play, and this helps provide additional terminology. Rule 0 still exists. You're certainly welcome to say, hey, I'm in bracket 2, except for this one thing. Is that okay with everybody? Having that conversation is great. So, like they're saying, this bracket isn't replacing Rule 0. Phenomenal, awesome. What I disagree with is Commander didn't lack a good way, because like you just said, I mean,
I think it was terrible.
It was abused, but like in just my personal experience, like going into your game store, whenever we sit down, usually the first words out of everybody's mouths are, "What kind of game are we trying to play?"
You're looking at a kind of a small scale. Yes, a lot of my experience of looking at things has come from my game store, but when you go down to a big event like what's coming up this weekend in Chicago, you're going to play with a larger audience, a broader set of players if you sit down to play casually. And being able to discuss things with strangers is a lot different than people sitting down to play things with people in your local meta, especially in our relatively small one.
But would it also... You're going to, let's just say, MagicCon Chicago. It's coming up. You're going to expect to be playing... not necessarily more competitive, but a broader range. So you're going in knowing that you're going to be playing at a different level than your LGS. So you still would sit down. I mean, I don't see people going to MagicCon and sitting down, because I mean that is, a structured event, which kind of like I was talking about. But you go down, you sit down, and the odds of you getting pub stomped there. Not really, because everybody's there and they're expecting higher power, they're expecting bigger things. Unless
I don't think that's not actually what I've experienced going to these events.
I mean, you're still going to seek out your quirky tables. You're going to seek out, but the general, and this is all just me talking out of my ass because I've never been able to go to a MagicCon or anything like that. But I can only assume you go there expecting majority of the time a higher level of gameplay, with the fringe cases of, hey, I'm looking for this.
I would expect a lower level than your smaller LGS that has kind of a core group. So you playing against your friends, if you play against the same people again and again, even if it's a group of 10 or so, even up to like 30 or 40, you're going to play with the same people occasionally. You're going to build your decks and see cards that they're playing, and your ideas are going to bounce off of each other. Your deck building is going to grow to beat different decks, to like manage different strategies, especially if in the realm of like brackets 2
Right.
and 3.
You develop your own meta.
Yeah,
in
there's
your
a
play group.
and now when you take, you cherry pick a couple people from different groups like that, you're gonna get a lower power level overall, especially when the drop-in events, which are what people are playing a lot of. If you've got like a structured tournament that's got rounds and prizes at the top end, you're gonna get the people who are like, I win games at my local group. The people who are trying to win, whose goal is winning, are more likely to enter into those events than I would say the majority of Commander play at something like a Magic Con is in the just sitting down to play with people without any structure or pairing from the event itself. And then there's casual play where you can sign up and just be put into a pod, and that's like the second largest group of players. And when you might get a little bit of a narrower range in that, but it's generally pretty casual.
Right, and so that, not to say it proves my point, but it kind of proved my point where, with the old system, those conversations did happen. They may not have been as accurate or as, I guess, honest as they should be, but they still happened.
This isn't actually a new system. It's just taking the system that wasn't codified and codifying it. Like, we didn't have a term for these decks that played chairs. We had a term for CDH, but it was built by the community.
Right.
3 and 4 are codifying 7 into different groups.
That's fair.
This is just a language to talk about your decks that you've already been using. It just means there's less confusion because there's something to base it on for both parties.
Right.
Rather than basing your 7 off of your local play group that you've beat and played, games, you win some games, you lose some games, so it's a 7.
I mean, there was still not as common because it is the trope for a reason of my deck's a 7, but you would still, in some fringe cases, you'd find the people who'd be like, hey, my deck's a 7, but I'm trying to, insert this, or this is the goal, is I'm trying to get as many lands out, turn them into creatures, and run you guys over. I'm trying to mill the whole table. I'm trying to mill myself.
Yeah.
You have those things. I just feel like in the article when he says one thing Commander has lacked is a good way to discuss what kind of game. I feel like we had a way. It may not have been the best way, but again, personal experience in a small town meta.
And you're going to see less of that. When you have a small town and you're playing against the same people, you're going to talk about it the same way or learn how to talk about it from the same group. Right. And each individual local area is going to have that. When you get into a metro area and you get into an area where you're going to a different LGS for a different tournament, you're not going to share that language with people because you haven't had the same group of players influencing you.
Right. That's fair. Well, moving on to his number 2, it's discussing bad actors. I mean, everybody knows they exist. You're not really. I'm just going to kind of gloss over this section.
This isn't meant to stop bad actors.
Right.
It's meant to encourage positive play.
So, yes. Again, back to my reservations and fears. If it's ever a sanctioned event or a structured event, it's just my fear is. This isn't necessarily discouraging bad actors, it's providing a smoke shield of sort for them. In some senses, it could protect the bad actors. And that is just, my personal fear on it is, like everybody has already talked about already, is, well, technically it's a 1, it's beaten to death. I mean, we can gloss over it, but it's just I think it's a valid concern.
So it's pretty valid. There are some issues with how Moxfield implemented the deck categorization, and it uses cards in your deck based on the limitations to deck building, but doesn't touch on tutors because it's impossible to codify a tutor using. There's,
right.
240,000 Magic cards or something
Sounds
like
right.
that. It might be 300,000. It might be 3,600. Anyway, there's a lot of Magic cards, And while there is, I think, Commander Spellbook, which is a lexicon of tutor of combos, it's even kind of loose to say 2-card combos, because there's a recent combo that came out that's Lumra and Aftermath Annis and Shifting Woodland, but you also need lands for that.
Right.
Is that a 2-card combo? Is it not a 2-card combo? Can we get a list of combos built from Magics and keep it updated for every set? It's just not possible. So there's limitations to being able to create a data set for their websites and systems that provide that deck building experience, even in just the tutors, and there's no way to do it for the ethos of each bracket.
Right.
That is your responsibility as a pilot of the deck to know where it actually fits by how it plays.
That's fair. And you jumped a little bit on me, but I did want to bring that up with the 2-card infinites and the 2-card combos. I guess, are they looking for 2-card combos or 2-card infinites that win the game? Because, I mean, you have examples such as, Sylvala and Umbral Mantle. Like, that's an infinite... I don't know if it's a combo. I mean, technically, you have infinite mana.
It is the most problematic part of their thing to me, is the term combo, because we all kind of know what a combo is. It's a deck archetype. It's a thing that works together to win you the game or put you in a position to win the game. But it specifically says 2-card infinite combos, and by my understanding of infinite as a tournament organizer and judge, it is something that you can demonstrate as a loop.
Right.
So you can repeat that process ad infinitum.
So, right, you can do it infinitely, but are there restrictions on just the fact that you can infinitely do something? Or are you, you're infinitely generating resources, can't do anything with it because I have no way to draw cards?
Yeah, that is something that needs to be addressed.
Are you infinitely drawing your cards? I can't flash out Labman. I've done that so many times.
In this system, it is a problem that it's not easily explained what a combo is. That is one of the major issues with this beta, and I don't know how you would go about fixing it. I think they kind of lean on the idea of game length, at least, in the descriptions about how they're playing, that might put you towards what combos are in that bracket. I might consider the combos you play in different formats are different. The pauper combos generally generate value, but there's few to no infinite, except specific decks. You're usually grinding value. And I think what they're intending is loops that create a game state that you would win. That also produces a game state in which you are ahead.
Okay, ahead, not just outright win.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I guess that was, my question was, it's like, oh, hey, I can sit here and, I can flicker my Geode Golem, or not Geode Golem, my Composite Golem. Wow, I'm messing this up. Nim Death Mantle and Composite Golem. There you go. My Composite Golem, and, boom, I have infinite mana. I don't have a sack outlet on board. I don't have an ETB outlet on board.
This is not about your game state, necessarily. It's about your deck building. So those 2 cards create an infinite loop that, with something else, can win you the game.
Right.
But that's the infinite loop, is those 2 cards. Yes, you need an outlet for that mana.
Right.
But that's not part of the combo. That's just something else in your deck that wins you the game. Having an infinite amount of mana is a game-ending state.
Right. And I guess that you can't account for it because everybody builds differently, and not everybody has the same knowledge of the game. But, I mean, you could take a guy... Prime example, me, when I first started. I think the first Commander deck I built was Progenitus. And I had the Composite Golem, Nim Death Mantle in there, because the whole goal of the deck was get Progenitus out. He's a 10-10. Nobody can deal with him in swing. So I would get those out, but then the only thing I could do was bring up Progenitus. I had no payoffs other than casting my Commander. And it was just, bad deck building on my part. And in a bracket system like this, or any other system that could possibly be devised, they can't account for that. But at some point, I feel like if they're still trying to implement restrictions of some sort, they need to be able to at least address, like, hey, infinite combos that have this as the goal. Because, I mean, you could accidentally throw an infinite combo in and be like, I didn't realize that's how that worked, or oops, all mana, but I have nothing to do with it because I didn't think that far ahead, and I was just trying to build a 1 that, played all my ponies, and now I have infinite mana, and now I'm automatically bumped up a bracket or two, or...
Realistically, when you're building a deck as a new player to the game, the bracket system isn't going to matter too much. Your play group or whoever you're playing with should understand and help you play games that are enjoyable by using their knowledge of the game to help the new player. And I know that's not going to happen every time,
right,
but that's what this is for, is to help players of a different level of understanding have kind of a reference to work with. And they talk a lot later in the article about intent in deck building. And you can only really have intent in deck building when you understand the game well enough to make choices like that.
Right.
So I would say an infinite combo in a deck built by a new player is not an intentional infinite combo.
But just because it is what I do best, let me go ahead and just rant a little bit more about the next brief topic of game changers. Why is...
I wonder, before you get started, whether this is a list of cards that they are hoping is a good example of cards that are... these are the game changers, and for intents and purposes of the beta, they are the cards that create a basis for where your deck is situated.
Right. For your local games, that makes sense. Me thinking if they ever try to do an event, there needs to be black and white yeses and nos.
How many people interact with bracket 3 in a tournament setting?
Well, it depends. Are you ever going to have a bracket 3 tournament in Iron Gold?
I might.
Well, there you go.
It kind of depends on how people feel about this bracket system and how much they want to go into it as an enjoyable experience of play rather than something built on competition. Your tournament players tend to be people who want to win prizes.
Right.
Whereas if you want to play casually, you don't need to play with something on the line necessarily.
Right. You're going to seek out the casual player versus seeking out the tournaments.
And we can run an event that's casual play, bracket 3, and all that's like the benefit you get from us running the event is you get paired into pods that you wouldn't normally play with, and that's a great thing.
Right.
But there doesn't have to be stuff on the line to create an event that is for one of these brackets.
That's fair. But specifically about the game changers, why is Worldly Tutor not mentioned?
Worldly Tutor is not a good tutor.
But he gets Crater Hoof. Every time.
Crater Hoof's a bad card.
Not if you're in bracket 3 and below. Crater Hoof is exactly what you're using Worldly Tutor for.
Sure. But there are a lot of cards that are better than Worldly Tutor. The benefit in blue of Mystical Tutor is that you can get something to the top of your library, and since you're a blue deck, you're likely to be able to get it and use it immediately.
Right.
The benefit in black is it's any card.
Right, it's disgusting.
The benefit in white with Enlightened Tutor is artifacts and enchantments tend to be very strong when you're looking for specific pieces.
Correct, but...
And creatures just suck. It's actually that in green you have access to Finale of Devastation, Court of Calling, and Green Sun Zenith, which all put the creatures directly into play, and those would be better than Worldly Tutor for this list.
You use Worldly Tutor to find a creature that finds Finale of Devastation, and then 2 turns later you can play it.
Which is why Worldly Tutor is bad. I just don't think tutoring a creature to the top of your deck is as game-changing as any of the rest of the tutors. And a lot of the goals of cards on this list is to create a balance of play. And if I'm completely honest, I play a lot of 4 and 5 kinds of games of Magic, and in those games, creatures aren't the important things to tutor for.
But why? So Fierce Guardianship's on here.
Sure.
Which is great, although it is restricted by non-creature spell. Why is deflect? I'm not coming at you. You didn't make the list.
No, you have a good point here.
Deflecting
Swat, I think, is a very powerful card. I could see it being on this list, but I think I understand why they didn't. In, say, Bracket 5 in CDH, when you cast Deflecting Swat, it is a better version of Fierce Guardianship.
Yes.
It's a counterspell because multiple counterspells are played. It is a counterspell that, if it's a removal spell, instead removes something that's more important. It can stop winds in a way through things that prevent spells from being countered. Stuff like that is very good in CDH. If you go down to optimized play, and people are playing a lot of good win conditions and spot removal, it becomes a good piece for changing the target of removal to protect your commander, to do things that are fairly powerful, like stopping a spot removal, or changing the target of a reanimation, or changing actively being a red counterspell. In Bracket 3, it gets worse. And in Bracket 2, it gets worse, because the spells that it's targeting are worse.
Okay, so
Deflecting Swat relies on your opponent's playing cards that Deflecting Swat can target.
Okay.
And red doesn't get many counterspells.
Right.
So it doesn't need to be on that list because blue's density of counterspells matter.
Yeah, when you first started talking, it was like everything you're naming is like, this card's better than Fierce Guardianship, this card's better than Fierce Guardianship. I was like, why isn't it on the list? And you're really starting to win me over on this, because it that breakdown of the lower brackets you go, the less viable or valuable targets for Deflecting Swat. So that makes sense. So the more game changers you have, you're expecting to go up in brackets, which means you're expecting to go up against Fierce Guardianships and Rhystic Studies and Ancient Tombs. So, okay.
And I think the inverse is true of Worldly Tutor.
I still think it should be on the list, though. I mean, you got every other tutor on there.
I think if Worldly Tutor was on the list, we'd have to put Green Sun Zenith and Green Sun Zenith and Court of Calling and other.
Well, no, because those cost more mana, and they're not necessarily. Green Sun Zenith isn't instant speed, is it?
Court of Calling is instant. Force or what is it?
Green
Finale of Devastation isn't instant. But they are both game enders, and Worldly Tutor is 1 mana. Then you have to cast the creature.
Speed.
Worldly Tutor's and then you have to cast the creature after you've drawn it, and it's a creature, which means it's probably not coming in at instant speed unless you have other things allowing it to. Whereas you're playing Court of Calling, you have what can be essentially cheaper than Worldly Tutor by tapping your creatures. It comes into play at instant speed, anything from your deck. Where Green Sun Zenith, I think, and Finale of Devastation, Green Sun Zenith is probably the worst of, because it has green in it as a restriction. But yes, Worldly Tutor is cheaper, but then you have to cast the creature.
Right, but it wouldn't be too terrible to be able to do that. I mean, you know how it works. Somebody's end step, and on your end step, on the Worldly Tutor, go find the creature. My turn. You know, you have that inherent advantage of, you know, doing on your turn. Presumably the table, especially in the lower brackets, where this would be a game changer, of people tapping out. And, you know, like you said, the higher up in brackets you go, you're playing against better cards, better strategies. In a lower bracket, I think Worldly Tutor is a game changer. Because
that's what I'm saying, is where Deflecting Swat is better at a higher bracket, Worldly Tutor is much better in a mid to low bracket.
But would that not make it a game changer, though? That would start pushing you up?
It kind of... I don't see why it would be one and other creature tutors would not be. Because, again, I think Court of Calling is much stronger. Even when you're looking at, lower brackets, you're going to have more creatures in play, more things are sitting on the board. Court of Calling becomes even better. And if you look at what they have on list, Survival is repeatable. Which lets you get, 3 creatures that win the game, or 1 big creature that wins the game. And they want to allow, 1 and 2 and 3, you are allowed to play a few tutors.
Right.
And we've got examples in other colors of tutors that are banned, like black has Diabolic Tutor. Blue has Spell Seeker and Solve the Equation. White has... I'm forgetting the 3-drop white enchantment tutor. And the legendary tutor from Kaldheim.
Right.
Green's other creature tutors are generally creatures. There's not a ton of them that put to hand or top of deck. I think if Worldly Tutor put to hand, it would belong on the list.
So I think a lot of green, Worldly Tutor is creature based, but a lot of green itself is creature based.
Sure.
Green, arguably in Commander, the strongest color.
I think
arguably
it used to be the strongest color, maybe. It's good at grinding value.
Right, you add green to any other color, and it amplifies it by crazy proportions. I was just watching a video. I'm trying to think of who was talking about it, but that's why it's in my brain. You have red, great, that's awesome, burn fast. You add green-red, it's a whole different thing. You have blue, super controlling, it's awesome. You add green, you get Simic, and everybody knows Simic is disgusting. There's no way about it. You add white...
Green makes any of your decks into something that mid-range as well. It doesn't make it a better deck. It makes it a deck that has more consistency in being able to pump out larger spells by ramping.
Right.
Being able to fix your mana base, being able to generate a large board state. That doesn't mean it's better. It just means it looks like it's doing better.
I mean... For some of us, looks matter. But
other color combinations play from the hand. Green plays to the board. So green looks like it's doing well even when it doesn't win the game.
Right. But even you have to admit, the green is kind of WotC's golden child. Green gets everything.
So
green gets tutors, green gets instant speed protection, green gets the big creatures, they get the ramp, they get the enchantment removal.
It's because it needs it. It's not because green is the best.
It doesn't
green
need
is the
everything.
worst. Playing creatures is...
Green does not need life gain, but green has life gain. Green gets a little bit of everything, and it just... I guess that's why it amplifies.
Maybe, but it gets the worst of everything in a lot of cases. It does its own thing is not so great. The main issue here in the game change, why the list is so small for green, is if we look at white, we have Drannith Magistrate and Smothering... excuse me. We have Drannith Magistrate and Smothering Tithe, which are things that stop opponents from doing things or hurt opponents in a way that their game actions make the opponent get value.
Right.
Blue, if we look at Blue's list, we've got a couple of those too. We've got Jin-Katax's Core Augur, we have Rhystic Study,
Expropriate
Force of Will, Fierce Guardianship, and Cyclonic Rift. They're on there because the ethos of Commander doesn't always fit with blue. People don't like playing against blue decks, so the blue list is going to be longer. Black is on there because we've got the similar things in Opposition Agent and Turgid, while also having game-ending spells like Bolas's Citadel and Ad Nauseam. Red, the main cards on that list are Jessica's Will and Underworld Breach, something that wins the game with a ham sandwich, and something that lets you play whatever you want from your hand, because you're getting 7 mana for 3, or sometimes more.
Right.
Is there anything in green that does what Bolas's Citadel does? Is there anything in green that does what Turgid, Opposition Agent, Drannith Magistrate, Jin Cataxis, Expropriate? Green doesn't do those things. Green plays in a way that people want to play with it. So It doesn't need to be on this list for making the ethical.
Just because green doesn't oppress everybody else,
exactly,
doesn't mean that it's not shooting you into the lead.
Sure, but we don't need to address those things in this list. If there was a card like Underworld Breach that makes you win the game on its own, essentially by having a deck full of cards that aren't bad, then maybe.
Gotcha. So, I mean, in one way of looking at it, I mean, aside from colorless, because colorless is just ramp. Like 90% of colorless is just ramp.
Tabernacle, because they wanted to show, hey, we don't want cards that prevent people from playing creatures. Glacial Chasm, because it stops people from approaching the game through a combat-oriented thing. Trinisphere, because it ruins people's day. Green doesn't ruin people's day. You've got Choke and things that affect lands, but those fall under the mass land denial. A lot of Green's game changers aren't necessary to include in this because they fall under things like mass land denial or not so much chaining extra turns, that's a bunch of blue cards, but the idea of including cards on this list that Green does to prevent other people from playing, there's just not that many outside of the Choke and Nature's
claims and
things that I guess the land destruction aspects of Green. There's a lot of cards in Green that do those kinds of effects, but none of them are terribly relevant for this list.
Right.
It doesn't screw with your opponent, so it doesn't need those cards. Just like Red doesn't screw with your opponent in a way that it needs those cards on the list. If we didn't have the clause of no mass land denial, the Red's list would be the largest one.
Jackal Hops and all them.
Jackal Hops, Obliterate, Decree of Annihilation, Blood Moon, Boil, all of those cards would go on that list.
Right.
And Green would also have a couple of them. And this list being shorter is a good thing.
Right. So, stepping back from the ethos of the colors, like we kind of just, shot down, which was my fault, and going back to the actual specifics of the Game Changers list, circling back to Worldly Tutor, why specifically, in black here, why specifically call out both Demonic Tutor and Imperial Seal?
And Vampiric Tutor.
And Vampiric Tutor, right. Why specifically name those three, but not include that in green? I guess, why
any card
specifically name these when they could have just blanketly called tutors?
They did blanketly call tutors, and this is just in addition to that. The tutors on this list, I think, are intended to make bracket 3 more relevant. You can either play these really broken cards or tutors to find them, or the most efficient tutors to find them. Essentially, when you put a tutor into a deck, this is another copy of the most powerful card for your deck at the time that's included in your list. So a tutor might be really good. A tutor could be better than any card on this list because it can be any card on this list. So for bracket 3, where the limitation is 0 to 3 game changers, it means that you're not, if you are deciding to play a tutor, you're not playing a tutor and 3 free counter spells.
Right.
If you're playing 2 tutors, you only get 1 free counter spell or 1 game-ending effect.
That makes sense.
It's just the most efficient ones. You can still tutor up things, and there's still options to find decks that search their library or use silver bullets. This is just preventing or moving the more combo-oriented tutors to the higher ends of the brackets.
That's fair. Well, I guess overarching, you defended the hell out of it.
It's got some problems. It's still in
Right.
beta. Play with it. Share what you're thinking about it. Let them have information to grow and change this to fit how you play Magic. Or at least how people play Commander.
Right. Yeah, like I said, overall, I think it is a net positive. I am looking forward to seeing what we can do within the brackets. I'm not looking forward to inputting all my stuff on Moxfield and getting my ego shattered by, turns out they're all 3s. But, no, again, I agree with it mostly. I have my reservations, and to be fair, a lot of my reservations are if they do a sanctioned event, and if, a lot of ifs, and then everybody already knows, whether you're at RLGS or at a MagicCon, everybody knows there's that one player who always, will, game the system and say, oh, well, it's actually not that bad, and then just go burr and ham the table. You're not going to get away from it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Wizards has in regards to, either amplifying it or even toning it back. Maybe, there's already speculation online that this will, with this whole Game Changers thing specifically, lead to some unbannings.
They did kind of address that in their article. They were talking about how things might be put onto the Game Changers list. Maybe that's why Green's so small.
Right. Which, hopefully, because I may or may not have purchased a few copies of Jewel Lotus, but that's just my personal beliefs, and hopefully one day it'll pay off. But with that being said, I just, thanks for coming out. Thanks for, ultimately winning me over and putting, not really winning me over. I agreed with it, but putting a lot of my fears, to bed, so to speak. And like I said, I really wanted to get this section of Middle Class Magic up and going to where I know I personally don't know enough about specific topics to do this by myself. Yeah. So, having you or anybody else that actually knows what they're talking about would be great. Because otherwise, you just hop on Facebook or Twitter, God forbid, and you just listen to people talk. And pretty much what I was doing here, just talk out of their ass. So having somebody else who actually knows what they're talking about is, just
there's a lot of
huge.
players playing Magic. There's a lot of perspectives on the game. I get to see a lot of that, being both like an owner of a store, a player of the game in a broad variety of formats, and as like a judge of events, and just by seeing different kinds of players come in and play games, I get to see a lot of what at least our small little Magic community cares about.
Right. And it's a game worth caring about. I mean, it's 30-something years old now. It's,
one of the most complex and interactive games out there, despite its flaws, which
right.
Modern games try to fix in like the mana system and that. But those flaws that have grown and changed over the years has made this game kind of beautiful mechanically.
Right. I mean, you can build a computer out of the game. Shout out Kyle Hill for showing us that. I don't understand it, much like a lot of this game, but it exists. This game is it's worth caring about, and I think that is what kind of ignites people's, sometimes for the worse, their passions. It's people care. If they didn't care, it would just be, oh, bracket system. I'm not going to pay attention to that. Oh well, I'm gonna do what I want. But no, people care. People give a crap, and I think that's beautiful, so to speak. But I think that's pretty much our time here for today. So again, thanks for coming out, and hopefully we can get some more of these segments coming out. I really like I love the content creation of like gameplay, but I do want to actually have discussions and understand the game better. And bringing you on and bringing other people on, I think, is the best way to do it. And I'm not just winging it and talking out of my ass and just putting it out there and be like, well, this is my opinion, take it or leave it. Like I got no problem being corrected or being guided in the right direction. So hopefully we'll have some more of these coming, and whether it's Joseph or anybody else, hopefully you guys enjoy the content. So I mean, with that, we'll just go ahead and say keep it cool, keep it casual, keep it conflicted. Until next time.